We help teams design better surveys, increase participation, and apply statistics so that your feedback turns into clear, actionable insight. Let's go into how StatQuestions will help you and your teams turn survey data into statistical proof. First, you have a dashboard that will give you an overview of everything that your company has surveyed. You have a dashboard button that gives you that overview, a cross survey button, which allows you to compare statistics across surveys, and you have an action center that allows you to figure out what actions have been created from these surveys. Let's go into how a survey is created. So when you're creating a survey, the survey will have a title, a description. It will allow you to select what industry your company is in, what is your business function, and to ensure that our statistics are validated, we ask for your total population size that you're surveying. As you're creating questions, you have the ability to generate your own questions, but we also have a tool that allows you to create questions using AI. So our algorithm has been tailored to ensure that our questions tie back to some sort of KPI and allows you to use the statistical models to identify what relationships these things have. Let's do a sample survey on how are we going to do employee onboarding. And ensuring that our employees get the best training. This is probably going to fall under a KPI category of satisfaction and loyalty because we want to make sure that our employees are satisfied with this process. We would then create this survey by clicking Generate Questions. And then these questions will be created purely around creating questions that tie back to the KPI category. And as you can see, it shows a variety of question types with the very many types that our software offers. And it also made sure that it tied it back to subcategories, which are inside of that category of satisfaction and loyalty. You then just click Add 5 questions, and then you have your questions added to your dashboard. You then have the ability to go in and edit these categories, but then you can also change using a database of very many KPIs that we've studied, benchmarked, and researched, and tie these questions back to a different KPI if you don't agree with the one that we chose. So for the sake of the demo, we'll then just publish this after we figure out what is the KPI mapping category that we want to tie back to. Do you want to capture demographic information about those employees? And then there you go. Your survey is published. You can then view the survey on this dashboard. And on this dashboard, I'm going to show you a few demo surveys that allow you to see StatQuestions and how powerful of a tool this really is. So let's use this employee onboarding survey that we've already completed, and then let's dive into how this works. Every survey is on your dashboard will give you some sort of quick result overview of an average score across all the questions. It allows you to see the number of responses. It allows you to see what the title is, whether or not it's active, closed, or in draft mode. And also, you have the ability to figure out what type of surveys that you are doing. These purely were under a technology industry because you're a technology company. But then when you click analytics, analytics will give you the deep dive into what these questions told us. So you have the ability to filter your results, and your results will change real time by looking at different roles across the company, different regions if you are global or if you're just national, different departments if different departments added that demographic information. You then have your first, which is just your average mean. It just gives you average scores across all the questions. You can click question analysis and get a deeper look into all the questions and even the questions and how they related to certain KPIs that you were trying to improve. Our survey also has benchmarking built in using research and data that we pulled in. And if a benchmark exists for your industry and by your company size, it will give you a benchmark comparison of how your results compare against industry best practices. In this case, it gives you a flag that tells you need improvement because you're below the industry mean. It tells you what the industry mean is according to this benchmark. It also tells you where you fall in terms of the median. You then also can click insights and generate insights from these questions. And as the algorithm loads from best practices and research that we've done, You then have the ability to get action items and insights on exactly what types of things you need to look at for this survey. As it's loading and analyzing, it's looking across the different populations, it's looking across the different categories, and it's also running a myriad of different statistical tests to identify if there's anything at all in this survey that stands out and needs to be looked into. From this survey, we found that culture fit influences the overall satisfaction. It says that respondents who felt like they fit well into the culture, then they were typically more satisfied. And it even tells you, with no black box, we're going to tell you everything you need to know. It shows you what exactly the test was that was run, whether or not it was significant or not, how many respondents that fell into that category from the survey. And then it also tells you whether or not the effect of that factor, which in this case is culture fit, whether or not it was significant, medium, or low. It gives you a recommended action for you to think about, and you have the ability to either add that to your action tracker board, or you can just view it here and use it for discussion across your teams. We also have very many other types of statistical tests that will be run in the background, and it will give you a dashboard that shows you all the different things that stand out in the survey. If you click driver analysis, we have the ability also to use decision tree analysis to discover what drives statistical outcomes. In this case, if I click a question from the 5 questions that were on this board, it's going to give us a driver importance, and it's going to show us whether or not any of the questions below that one or around that survey drive whether or not that question is high or low. In this case, we found that we wanted to rate the quality of the training that we receive. So in this case, we're looking at now, if your training is good, we want to figure out what things drive people to be above a 7 in the ranking. In this case, if I drive over it, we can clearly see that when people are satisfied with the onboarding experience, typically that is a factor that's related to the training that they receive. People who feel like they fit well in the company culture typically also receive better training. And we can also see how these questions drive whether or not the quality of the training ranking was higher. So that tells us that training has some factor in how people respond to these other questions. It also has the ability to look at these key drivers at a much lower level, and it would just tell you whether or not what a low performer was. Do you have any high performers? It would tell you, do you have a gap that you need to work on? And ultimately, we even look at giving some recommended actions for things for you to look into. If you go into the next one, which is segment comparison, we also have the ability then to also look across questions and across a few different demographic areas and how they compare. Let's focus on rating the quality of training again. If I click compare by role, I want to figure out, does engineering compare to customer success? Do they have differences that are statistical between each other? If I click compare, then what that gives me is there's no significant difference in this case. Once again, no data science degree preferred. You don't need it. We have the ability to tell you in plain language exactly what you need to look at. In this case, the statistical results show you that there was no difference, but if you wanted to see the math, you can, but that tells us that there's nothing to look at in this case. You have the ability also to do cross-question analysis. So if I click cross-question analysis, it's going to compare, do these questions correlate to one another? It's another way. What is the difference between this and decision tree? Decision tree analysis figures out what is the break point at which someone answers a question and it starts to make a difference. Question analysis here, which the correlation tells us statistically that do these questions relate to each other at all? Just the 2 different ways to really analyze this. If questions are answered over time, we have the ability to also look at a line graph and tell us, do things trend lower or average over time? And then we also have the ability to do what the holy grail of this is. In this case, we uploaded some sample data for you with 4 KPI metrics, and they uploaded time to productivity, retention, the performance score, and their manager satisfaction. So this is where we took all of our survey questions, and then we have an algorithm built in to drive whether or not these questions made a difference on your KPIs. We'll analyze the KPIs, and this tells you that we found correlations across questions and across those KPIs. So in this case, this is the view that you'll get. If you look at how satisfied you are with onboarding, it shows you that that is highly correlated to the KPI that we uploaded, the manager satisfaction. We can also see here that time to productivity is much lower when people are dissatisfied with onboarding. We can also see, if we go further down, that if people receive better training, that also tells us that their performance is statistically higher. There's going to be some relationship between one, but once again, we tell you that this shows you relationships and correlation. It does not necessarily tell you causation, right? We still need to dive into causation. But what we do here is, though, we give you the insights needed to make a decision and figure out and focus exactly where you need to focus, and only if you need to focus on it. One of our favorite features that people will really enjoy is the ability to go in and look at our action tracker. If StatQuestions identifies a trend or something that's highly impacting, what will happen is it will highlight that action item and it will automatically trigger it to go to your action board. If you go in here and you click a action item, you have the ability to work through action items. And in one case, we have a life cycle all the way from asking the question, looking at the statistical model, and then being able to figure out how do we actually resolve this. Employees who see people take action on it respond to surveys quicker, more often, and they actually think that the company cares. So with all that being said, we have the ability to build multiple teams in here, change your settings, but more importantly, are you ready to turn your survey data into statistical proof?